All right, hello everyone, and welcome to the VR Creator and Experience Designer panel. You've survived so far, congratulations. I believe there is only one panel on VR right after this one. That will be the last one of this year's Digital Hollywood. I strongly encourage you to stick around for that one. It will also be very interesting. So, what about we go down the table and I will ask my dear panelists to introduce themselves and tell a little bit more about what you're doing and why you're here, why you're working in the virtual reality field as of today. I'm Celine Tricart. I'll be the moderator. I'm the founder of Lucid Dream Production, director of photography. So let's start with you, Edward.
My name's Edward. Hello. My name's Edward Button. I'm a director of photography. I come out of I'm a union DP who got into this world about 4 years ago. I went and partook in NYU's Media Lab, ITP, right when DK1 came out. And so sort of getting into gaming, physical computing, computational media, spatial media, this sort of work. So after that, I landed pretty squarely in cinematic VR, 360 video to start, and now we're working a bunch in the game engine. I recently shot Doug Liman's VR series, which was released this morning, the first episode, Invisible. So go to Samsung VR and watch it. We need everybody to watch everything 4 times so that this keeps happening. I've also done projects with The Mill, with Nani De La Pena, and I'm currently working, I've got a residency at Technicolor New York Postworks, where I'm working on a game engine project, a very artistic game engine project, and developing live action work.
We have the trailer for Invisible, so let's take a look.
Sure, yeah. So this is the trailer for the series. Episode 1 was released this morning. I highly recommend looking at these things in goggles.
Do you want to do it?
Yeah, sure.
They are an incredibly secretive family that has shied away from public scrutiny, usually behind layers of publicists, and carefully manage media relationships.
I, Dr. Richard Ashland, being of sound mind, have chosen to leave my entire fortune to my granddaughter Tatiana Ashland.
Where's Tatiana?
She's on her way to New York.
I want you to do something for me.
Girl is an Ashland. No one knows about her. We can do what we want with her. She's the key to our future.
You know, my grandfather left a message for me before he died. He said someone was going to kill him.
He was delusional.
Doesn't stop.
So it's a little hard to watch these things when you're scrolling around on a computer, but it's interesting. It's the first, it's being billed as the first narrative sort of series. I don't think it is, but it's pretty close to one of the first large production series with like heavy lighting and a lot of traditional cinema work. So check it out.
Yeah, that looks pretty amazing, even though it's very hard to watch.
Yeah, it's really hard to watch scrolling around, but there's a lot of action scenes. Simon Crane was one of the directors, who's a well-known stunt director and like second unit action director. He did Rogue One, as well as Doug and a couple of other directors as well. Shot like a series. It's 5 to 6, I think it's 5 episodes at this point.
All right, now we're going to go to Chilla Anderson, who is the head of content relations for Nokia Technologies.
So my role at Nokia is actually to evangelize the technology with the creative community. So I'm here to talk about our camera and talk about our technology. And I welcome anybody who has some interest in talking about what we do. But I have a team of people who are doing productions and integrating with production teams, and we have a camera, virtual reality camera that's Celine put up there. It's a 360 and it captures 360 3D virtual reality camera. It also captures sound. So as you can see on the picture, it's like a small ball, and there are 8 lenses in the small ball. And basically it outputs those 8 lenses and the 8 audio that is captured by the camera, 8 different spots through one single cable. So it's the ease of use with this camera has been one of the big pluses compared to some of the earlier rigs people were using. It also, every sensor has 2K by 2K resolution, and it has globally synced shutters between the 8 lenses. So we have been working with the creative community already, both bigger Hollywood studios and smaller studios, VR studios. And I wanted to talk about some of the pieces that we created, so you could check it out online. So we have a partnership with Disney, and we have released already one theatrical piece, which is the Pete's Dragon VR experience, which is available on Samsung VR and other YouTube as well, other platforms. It's basically a piece where you experience from Pete's point of view riding the dragon across a canyon. It's a very interesting experience. It's also, I think some of these pieces I'm talking about, I think the camera is really favored by filmmakers for rigging options, which is really, it's really portable, it's light, it's a small footprint, so people prefer when you can hang it out of the helicopter, you can put it on a cable cam. So another piece we have just released 2 weeks ago is a music video with One Republic, and it was a partnership with Universal Music Group and Here Be Dragons and MPC. And we have basically put a camera and guided the viewer across an alley from one room to another. It's a story about a girl and a boy who are noticing each other across an alley. They live across a narrow alley. And with the help of the cable cam, we transported the viewer to one room, to the street, to the other room, and kind of guided them through the story. And the third piece I wanted to mention, which we're most proud of at the moment actually, it's Argos. The Argos file, which won the Proto Awards 2 weeks ago for Best Live Action. And it's a crime resolution by reliving somebody else's memory, which is you relive the murder victim's memory, you become that other person, and the whole story is told in POV. So it's, again, another way of guiding the user through a story. It's a POV. Perception. So it's very, very challenging, or how should I say, it's a very revolutionary content because it uses everything that we were told not allowed to do in VR, which is fast cuts, dark environments, visual effects integration into lat longs, and all sorts of things. Moving the camera. Actually, the main actor, the victim, he's walking around with the camera above his head. So, it went a lot of work into making that work, and it's amazing.
All right, and right next to Chilla, we have Andrew Wilson, who happened to have directed a movie with the Nokia Ozo and survived to tell about it. It's his
2-for-1 picture.
Do you want to tell me more about, introduce
Ozo
yourself
there, right.
and the shoot?
We were lucky enough to be hired by Shinola, which is a kind of they make bikes and leather goods, and they're based in Detroit, and they're part of they position themselves as kind of part of the Detroit resurgence. So they asked us to just do a kind of a factory tour in 3D, and we'd never worked in this in this environment before with these cameras. So it was a huge learning experience for us. When I see what you guys are working on, it's incredible what the possibilities and what's out there. You really, just in the short time that I worked on it, you could, the mind races with the possibilities. So, it was a really exciting thing. Even though it's sort of a relatively mundane, kind of basically an industrial. I think it's still, and we sort of really just scratched the surface of the possibilities of the technology. So when I see what you guys are working on, that's really kind of much more kind of pushing the limit and really exciting. But I think there's obviously all sorts of applications.
And finally, we have Rory, who will introduce yourself, and I would like you to talk specifically about a project that you did that I really like, that was shot at the LA River.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Elaine. My name is Rory Mitchell. I'm a co-founder of Beard and Glasses VR with my partners Dan Lickblau and Josh Poland. We are a boutique VR studio based in downtown LA. We've done some branded content for Kettle One and some documentary work for the Department of Cultural Affairs, and just finished up a couple of our first narratives, a couple of love stories. But the project that I'm here to talk about is called Tom Explores Los Angeles. This comes out of, or Tom wanders around Los Angeles. For a while, it was a historical consultant as well as a theater director doing research into the built environment. I met Tom. This led to making short history documentaries about Los Angeles, and led to meeting Tom Carroll, who's had a YouTube show called Tom Explores Los Angeles, and we decided to make a short VR piece about the history of the LA River, specifically the confluence of the Arroyo Seco and the LA River, which you may be better acquainted with for being the intersection of the 5 and the 110. And after doing a lot of research, it turned out that there was an incredible amount of history based in that one location. And we have a clip from it. This picks up right after Tom has skateboarded in, hopped off his skateboard, informed you that when the Spanish explorers arrived in Los Angeles, this was their first sight of Los Angeles.
And we know that because we have access to their travel journal, and I have a quote here. I'll read it real quick. We entered a very spacious valley, well grown with cottonwoods and alders, among which ran a beautiful river from the north-northwest. Towards the north-northeast, there is another riverbed which forms a spacious watercourse, but we found it dry. Dry, or in Spanish, arroyo seco, dry creek, dry wash. Jump to 1781, the year the Pueblo of Los Angeles is founded. 44 people make their way up from Mexico and found the Pueblo of Los Angeles. And that first piece of infrastructure that I talked about was right here. It was a dam. They dammed part of the LA River, and that water fed the Pueblo. Next door, we have this green bridge. That green bridge is a legacy of the Southern Pacific Railroad. They made their connection in 1876. LA was then connected to the Transcontinental Railroad. It brought in people, it brought in goods, and it really allowed Los Angeles to grow to 1.5 million people in 1938. 1938, that same year, we had a terrible flood, an incredibly destructive flood. We actually have footage of the flood. If we look over here, we can see just how devastating the waterway of the LA River was. Just millions of dollars worth of damage. So the city leaders knew they had to do something about it. So they contacted the Army Corps of Engineers. And the Army Corps employed 17,000 people to lay 2 million cubic yards of concrete along all 51 miles of the LA River. While they were doing that, the 110 freeway was being built. The first freeway west of the Mississippi was being built. We also call it the Arroyo Seco Parkway, and it's called that because it follows the path of the Arroyo Seco. It goes all the way up into Pasadena. And that's interesting because that is the same path that the Native Americans took for thousands of years. Because it was a dry creek, it was an easy pathway up to what we now know as the San Gabriel Valley. And we know that because we have access to the...
All right. So thank you so much. I really like this piece. I think this is a beautiful use of virtual reality. I've learned, so I literally live 5 minutes from this location. I've learned, and I've shot a movie about the LA River, as you know, and I've learned a lot, and it was beautiful use of 360. So, Chilla, I have a question for you. As the head of content relation for Nokia, what are your thoughts on what's the type of content that's particularly fit for virtual reality? There's a lot of people who talk about documentaries, of course, live, horror, I mean genre. What are your thoughts on cinematic VR and the type of content?
Yeah, I think I got really excited about the POV content lately because we did the Argos piece where you can become somebody else and you can, I think guidance is very important in 360. Like think about when you write as a writer, how you're gonna guide your audience, still giving them the freedom to look around, ideally even interact with the content if that's possible. But there's a way of guiding through, but you experience what that victim is experiencing, the violence or the love or the thrill or whatever. I think in POV that's really interesting exploration. There was another piece of content done with also in POV called Defrost, which Randall Kaiser's episodic, he shot 12 episodes, and that's a woman who has been frozen and wakes up and meet her family again after 30 years. And it's just a wonderful way of becoming somebody else. You really think when you watch the content, you become that person. So I think POV is one example, but in general, I think where you can create the sense of presence, where things are happening, you know, the interesting things happening around the camera within 15 feet, when things unfold when a story could be told that it is near the viewer and it can be experienced by the viewer, like he or she is there or he or she become this other person or go to this other place.
And Andrew, in the Shinola film, you decide to take the first-person point of view. The actor, Luke, is talking directly to the camera, so we'll feel like we're there. But also, as a director in virtual reality, there is a lot of losses. We lose the frame, the close-ups, all those little things that also very important for comedy. So what are your thoughts on directing for virtual reality and those losses?
Well, I think you do lose some things. I think you probably gain. I think the pros outweigh the cons. You know, some of the things like the camera not moving, I think forced us to try to come up with some other kind of more creative solutions. We didn't, you know, we sort of settled on this kind of man on the street, Letterman-esque style out of necessity. We didn't have a lot of time to prep or plan. There was no real script, so we just decided to shoot a ton of footage and see if we could cobble together three or four funny minutes. But I think, you know, the next time I'd like to have something much more carefully planned and scripted and really kind of take advantage of the technology. I mean, we did a couple of shots, I think, that are fun, but you know, again, like when I see what you guys are doing and when you have a, you know, kind of a more careful plan, I think you can really take advantage of the phenomenal
so there is a lot of losses, but what you're saying is, oh, wow, we're also gaining by doing virtual reality.
For sure. I mean, I think it's like some of the things like the sound cues and things like that that you can use. And I mean, I'm really just learning myself, so I feel like there's a tremendous amount of opportunity. It way outweighs the things that you have to do differently.
Make sure you speak on the microphone.
Sorry. You mentioned something really, really good, though, that you don't really lose your close-ups. They're just much harder to get, and you have to get creative about how you make that impact. So you say, well, we want to make this impact that we would traditionally make a close-up or an insert shot on a 135 millimeter lens. So instead, we've got to get creative how to make that exact same impact with other devices. And they could be literally a traditional close-up, but using those other devices, we can still make the same point.
Absolutely.
And that's where the creative, it's a really good point, I think.
So thank you, because you're introducing my next question. That's for you, and it's on cue. We have some lights on your face, so we can talk about cinematography now. It's funny because on your profile photo there, you're with a film camera, and you come from traditional cinematography, just like I do. So my question for you is, do you think being a DP in virtual reality, do you think you need this wealth of knowledge coming from film and traditional cinema and bring that knowledge into VR? Or do you think that DPs that are maybe younger and just starting, doesn't have this knowledge, can also have like a place in VR, maybe fresher ideas? Or what are your thoughts on that?
That's actually a really good question. I think it's absolutely beneficial to have that sort of traditional background. When I went to AFI, and when I went to film school, we were taught like very specific conversations that have been happening for decades. We have the same terminology that we use. We can go anywhere in the world and work with anybody who's a professional, and we're going to say this even across languages. We understand how to communicate. So I do think there's a place. You don't have to have that. One of the lovely parts of the technology is that you could just place a camera in a room, like one of these 2-lens cameras, and work. And I think I encourage everybody to do that. Everybody should shoot. But I think there's absolutely something to be learned from that traditional background. One of them being communication, for example. Like you lose 30 seconds of setup or a minute of setup over a month, you're losing a day of shooting. There's a lot of how we plan things out, how we think about light. That's really important. One of the things when we shot Invisible, we didn't really have successful video taps yet. I think your camera was the only one that actually could be monitored. At the time, I mean, we were like, hacking a theta on top so the director could watch something. But what was really special about it is it did actually brought me back to a really traditional cinematography background, is that we had to use our eyes. Our video tap was like looking down a tube next to the camera, where you were looking through a Leica where you saw the action. So, one of the things that's really important to learn, there's a lot to learn from a traditional cinematography background where you're not going to see what you've actually shot till the next day. Use your light meter to know, hey, I've got that exposure outside, to test your camera so you know what's happening. The old world of cinematography, you call the lab and you get 3 numbers, and those 3 numbers, red, green, and blue, or however you want to do it, are going to tell you everything you need to know about your image because you saw it with your eyes and you know how much silver essentially turned over in the film. And that's all we needed to know. Now we have all these complications. So I think like learning to say, hey, let's use our eyes. Let's go back to the day, back into a traditional thing. We'll plan our stuff out, stop, bend over wherever the camera is, look at the look around us and say, do we believe this world? And that's something that I think actually started to be lost with digital cinematography, is that we just suddenly started looking at a screen. You get stuck in another room with a director. You're not even in the room because you've got a screen in traditional, and then you've got to hide in VR. So like some of that traditional things of like, let's stand here together, look at the scene, prep for it, all of that work I think is extremely valuable. At the same time, it's not a barrier to entry, which is wonderful, and allows creative, it allows people to do things that don't necessarily have that background.
Yeah, I'm 100% with you.
Mike, I want to quote Mike Woods. He's was formerly at Framestore and has White Rabbit VR, and he says, your first instinct, and I've experienced this on almost every shoot I've been on, your first instinct as, I say, a producer or director is to get rid of your DP. What do I need him for? There's no light, everything's available light. And then your second instinct is something else, and your third instinct is get the phone, I hope he's still available. And one of that, or they're still available. And I don't think that that's necessarily that you necessarily always need a DP, but I think you need that knowledge as a director. You need to have that knowledge is very, very useful, because something gets lost.
I totally agree, yeah. I mean, on the kids' music video, we used a lot of time on lighting, and I think you almost need a set designer as well who kind of hide the lights, because in 360, you will see everything. It's not like, traditional that you light it behind the camera and then you don't see the lights, just action.
No, and that's one of the reasons your piece looks so good and has no grain and is not flat, is that it's totally lit, and it's lit so well that like most people don't realize it's lit. One of the great things about this format is it can absorb non-motivated light. I find it can absorb overlighting. I mean, we overlit about half of Invisible, and it totally works. But that's one of the reasons your piece looks so good. I was like almost shocked. It was like, that's the Nokia that I saw? It looks great. But one of the reasons is that it's lit. It's like, in essence, it is like film. You have to expose for the medium and be aware of that.
I'm very sad that our sound friend didn't make it to the panel, but he was texting me at 4 a.m., so I'm guessing I know why he didn't make it. So we're gonna go to you, Rory, because so many times producer come and ask me, hey, we can't afford an Ozo, we cannot afford a Jaunt one. Is VR, can we still do VR? What can we do as an independent production company that doesn't have a lot of money? Is it accessible? And so can you tell me a little bit more about your piece, like the type of budget we're talking about, and how did you make that happen?
Yes, I certainly hope it's possible. No, we had no budget for this. We just had 4 months. Luckily, we've gotten some branded work to carry us through these things and give us the freedom to make our passion projects. But yeah, we've always subscribed to the idea that who or what you're pointing the camera at is far more important than what the actual camera is. In this piece, and a lot of that goes into story, a lot of that goes into pre-production and figuring out how you're going to tell the story and what the most fun story could be. So with this, we knew that we wanted to do a VR piece about the river, and we thought that doing it in a single location and showing all of the history that came through that one place would be more fun for the 360 degrees. We also knew that it was going to be visually interesting because of the sheer amount of concrete that's down there in the confluence. Like, those walls are probably 30 feet high around you. And also, we knew it was a little dangerous down there, and we think that that's one of the best uses of VR, is to take you places that are either not safe or are not affordable or are in some way like a prohibitive place. And the story of the LA River is the story of its flooding. This is why we have those high walls there, and when the rains start, that river can rise very quickly. So it's not safe to go down there. It's almost like an AR piece in a way, in that if you were down there, we could have brought all of that stuff up in AR goggles. So this is kind of a faux AR piece. And then we, as far as actual production, we went, and because we didn't have access to the fine technology of being able to actually see what the hell was happening at that time, we went and pre-shot everything. We went down there and did a test to see how far away from the camera he was, where the camera should be. We shot that a couple of times, and research and story and all that.
That's a beautiful message of hope.
Good.
Do you think there is also room for indie VR filmmaking in terms of distribution and visibility?
Absolutely. I mean, I think especially right now in VR, there's still, as you've heard, there's still a dearth of content. There's not a lot of stuff out there, like new voices, people, especially, talent that hasn't used 360 yet, bringing fresh ideas into it. Like the Shinola piece has got some of the best vibes of any VR piece out there. Like, it's just like, it's categorically different from other stuff that we've seen. But there's a lot of opportunity. Facebook 360, YouTube 360. These videos work very well for the larger public. People are still amazed by it, and it really opens up whole new vistas in storytelling. I think there are a lot of interesting debates as far as like how it gets made right now that I think allow for a big, people can make stuff, get it seen, and maybe one day monetize it.
Yourself, what camera do you own or rent for your project?
We use a variety. We use a couple of different GoPro-based cameras, one of which we modified with 195-degree fisheye lenses, which let you get much closer to the camera.
And if I had like a budget of like $500, can I buy cameras?
Oh yeah, I think you should get this fine Samsung gear right there and just start making stuff and figuring out how it works.
That's the best one for a couple $100, and it actually does a really good job.
All right, I'm gonna go back to you, Chilla. Now, so this is definitely the entry level of VR. We have the high-end with the Ozo, the Jaunt. There's the Google Odyssey, a couple of other high-end cameras. What is the future for those cameras? Because we know that light fields around the corner, photogrammetry, volumetric capture. Do you want to talk a little bit about those technology, and do you think there is still room for a traditional camera in virtual reality in the next 10 years?
Yeah, I think, the camera is going to improve in a sense. I mean, today, some of the cameras, all the cameras have different capability, but if we look at, most of the cameras, they have room for improvement for various reasons, either the form factor or the resolution or dynamic range. So I think those things will catch up pretty quickly to the current, cameras and the traditional cameras, the 2D or 3D cameras. So I think that's one thing. I think also we need to think about cameras for different purposes, for high-end cinematic pieces versus, like news reporting, where I just need to be really quick and portable and get there and get the story and go. So also cameras that can be, put on a drone, and so we have done with our camera, but there's a couple of things, need to improve.
But more and more people are using, instead of shooting with a camera, that's only lets you basically look around. You can't do room scale, which is being able to physically move in the VR. So a lot of people are starting doing photogrammetry. Are you guys familiar with photogrammetry? Yes? No? Do you want? No? I see a no. Photogrammetry is basically, you want to scan a room, you take a bunch of photos, very detailed photos of a room, and then using either a laser-based positioning system or GPS, you can replace the photo and you rebuild this room using photos or real texture into a game engine, for example, for virtual reality. And volumetric capture, so photogrammetry is what we call inside out. We shoot from inside to outside. Volumetric capture is kind of the equivalent to capture a performance of an actor, where we have like a bullet time system, a lot of cameras surrounding an actor that's playing its part, and we're capturing the actor from all the angles, and then we recreate this actor in 3D in a game engine, again using the capture from all those cameras. So what those technologies are allowing you to is having a quality that's close to live action, close to realism, but being able to do interactive or room scale experiences. Very quick explanation. So what do you think VR, we will still be doing 360, like not being able to move in a scene in 10 years?
No, I'm actually very excited about, and hopefully shooting very soon a piece with the volumetric or the photogrammetry kind of solution, where you actually allow the viewer to interact with the story. So you can go closer to things. If you want to go closer to that plant in the corner, you can start walking towards, and you actually catching up and feel like you're walking towards that, and interact with different other actors or whatever in the story. I think that's fascinating opportunity. And how do you write for that? I think it's also very interesting. Like, the writer really have to know this technology well before it can write for this, because you have to have different versions of the story depending on where the viewer choose to go or choose to do.
What, Edward, do you want to talk more about photogrammetry?
Yeah, I've worked a bunch with photogrammetry, and photogrammetry is really interesting. What I was thinking or saying is also, the photogrammetry experience where you have agency and you have your first person. That's one sort of thing, and 360 video is, you're stuck more like a movie in empathy. In a video game you have ego, in a movie you have empathy, right? And so some of the experiences we're talking about are like walking a slippery slope between the two. But I personally think, I'm totally thrilled. I've done photogrammetry work. I think it's awesome. I love it. But I think we're just, 360 video has a ton of legs. There's an absolute place for it. People don't always want to walk around. A lot of times, this is why the television has been so popular, where you just want to sit back and watch it and slip away and not have to think and not have to do. So I think 360 video absolutely has a lot of legs, while at the same time, the more gaming-oriented experience with first person is absolutely fascinating, and something where us as directors and cinematographers also need to look, because it's just as relevant in that world. It's just a real-time world. But I think you've got tons of video legs.
Yeah.
We're just beginning to figure out placement of cameras, cutting. All of these things just really beginning.
Yeah, I agree. I think we're just, having enough challenges with this one camera or a couple of cameras I think, but it's definitely coming, and I'm very excited about that topic.
Yeah, you're raising a good point about that. One is not necessarily the future of the other. It's about being active or being passive.
There's different genres.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. I mean, with 360 video, we're at the place, like, if you've noticed, anytime you've shown somebody VR, they have an aha moment. So we're like that time where we're like a year past Lumiere's train going, you know, as people are still like, oh, and everybody sees it. There's a physical reaction to it. So we're just beginning there.
So, Andrew, you've finished your first VR film. Hopefully you'll do some more. If you could, what have you learned? If you go back to Detroit tomorrow, reshoot that movie, what would you do differently?
Well, I think kind of what I was saying before, I mean, I think this worked kind of for sort of guerrilla style shooting from the hip. But I would like to try to, you know, have something, you know, scripted and more planned, something that really utilizes the technology. And then there's, I mean, our thing was funny. The things that are theoretically funny, most of the examples of work that I've seen have been kind of more serious. The Cirque du Soleil
Why do you think that is? Why do you think there is so little comedies in VR?
I don't know. Maybe because it's like what Edward was saying. We're just sort of starting out, and the things that you saw when film was first starting out were kind of more, I don't know, more action oriented, or you know, it's like you'd see a horse running or something like that. And then I mean, I don't know. I actually don't know enough about
Comedy is the hardest genre, period, because it's all dependent on timing. Right? Getting that laugh, it's all timing.
Yeah, I mean, I was just thinking about the close-up thing that we were talking about. Not being able to get a close-up and want like just a little quick solution. The thing that we had, Luke was doing just a bit in front of the camera, and then we wanted to have him say something funny, kind of in a close-up, and realized it didn't work. So we just ended up starting him farther back, redoing his bit, and then having him take a step in to that spot, and it worked great. And those kinds of little things, you know. Those kinds of little solutions, I think, kind of are stimulating and fun to kind of come up with. I feel like I would like another shot at it. I mean, it's like classic kind of case about things you wish you'd done differently. I mean, it's such a hard question. Everything, I guess, is the answer.
Yeah.
You know, to a certain extent. But it's just so stimulating and so much fun to experiment with. And
it was a very interesting process for me just to look at you and Luke working together. And, well, having Diozo, we had the live preview from the camera and blocking the shot, looking at it, and now it's a bit off, and changing the blocking again and looking at the shot. And there's a lot of rehearsal involved and a lot of changing little things between takes. And, yeah, it really felt like you were learning by doing and constantly changing things, you and
yeah, I mean, I think it was a 2-day shoot, and after the first day, we kind of got together and like, man, we need to figure out a couple shots that really utilize the technology. So I think the second day even, I mean, it's that kind of a learning curve, or at least it was for us. It's so steep and fast that the second day, I think we got a lot better stuff because we were thinking kind of really concentrating on the technology.
I wanted to mention that I think when you asked about the photogrammetry and other stuff, I think we start to move the camera just now. Like in the beginning, I think everybody believed the camera should not move, and I think some people still shooting with that mindset. Now that you actually start moving people while you tell the story, while you show them, try to create that presence in movement, I think that's already just a new subject still that people still need to experiment with and get better at it, so that passive entertainment experience, you get not just in one position, but start using some of the traditional techniques. And how do you do that in VR? I think that's also new.
Yeah,
people will acclimate too.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. It's not only us learning, but the audience learning.
Yeah, there's like when we do dailies, it was like, okay, we have 3 people watching, one with a steel stomach, one that's normal, one that gets sick at everything, and finding out. And so some of that is the feeling of vertigo when you move the camera. The other part of that is that your viewer and your audience is not yet acclimated to this environment. And once they do, we'll have more freedom as well.
It's insane how fast things are going in the VR world. I mean, if you go back to film history, so cinema was invented, and then 1 or 2 years later, there was the first traveling, which was literally just putting the camera in a boat in Venice, and that was the first traveling, and then the first cuts and the first, close-up, and those were years apart from each other. And in 6 months, in 1 year in VR, it looks like we are reinventing the wheel again, and not moving the camera, and then suddenly we start moving the camera and cutting. Supposedly we're supposed to do very long shots, stay at least 10, 15 seconds. And I've seen pieces, including the Shinola piece, as a shot in there that has only 6 seconds and works just great for many different reasons. So it's a constant evolution of and learning curve, not only us, but yes, the audience. I think you had a question.
Yeah. This is kind of relating to camera movement, but also blocking. I know, Mitchell, you said that you had shot something, and then you went and checked on it, and then you did like a pre-shoot, and then moved back. And you guys, Wilson, you said you did it over a course of a couple days. I know I spoke with you, Ed, about shooting something and then giving a week to check it, and then go back and reshoot whatever doesn't work. I was curious, like general for many of you, what sort of rehearsal time you want to plan, and obviously it's dependent upon the script and the story and or no script. But is there rehearsal time with the actors? What does that involve? How long should you equip to do that?
We just we just finished these love stories, and one of them was done with an immersive theater playwright that we've worked with, and so we had 2 theater actors, and we rehearsed for probably a week and a half, 2 weeks, each scene, and we pre-shot some of those scenes as well before actually shooting them. So we kind of rehearsed it like we would rehearse a play.
And when you rehearse, do you actually shoot with the camera and look at it, or what do you do physically as a director? Because there is no angle camera or anything. So how do you look at the scene?
Looking at the scene like a person, as though if I were in this room with these people, like creeping on them, where would I want to stand or sit so that I could kind of have the most interesting experience of this interaction between these people, and then kind of thinking of it in terms of classic stagecraft and like moving people further and closer away to kind of draw attention and kind of how they are. So we would have rehearsals, and then we would shoot those rehearsals, and then we would look at those rehearsals and show the actors their performances in the headsets, kind of like the way you guys did too.
It's really, really interesting to talk about stagecraft. First of all, rehearsals coming from the film world, it's like you're just lucky if you get it. And you get an in-demand actor, you just want as much time as possible. But the stagecraft thing is a big deal. Like, a seasoned film actor is going to know when they see a 135 millimeter lens or a 200 millimeter lens come on that they need to slow their action down, because if they move if they go like this, they're going to move 50 feet across the screen. So they get that. But with VR, it's like action's happening over there, and the actor over here is just sort of standing there, and they kind of forget that they're on camera. So showing them the work and including them in that process, which maybe breaks one of the traditional rules. Like a lot of actors, they don't want to see their dailies, they don't want to know anything about it. But in this format, I think through rehearsals, that's actually a really good point. Because you're blocking your you're blocking your actor to the camera, the camera. So your actor, and whereas normally you move the camera to the actor, it's like the opposite way around. So getting them on board and everybody working together, I think is a really important thing that helps facilitate the process of an interesting scene.
Yep, so we have this real-time monitoring, and it can be replayed. So we always show the actors in the beginning during rehearsal, this is how it looks, what you're doing. And usually the reaction is very, very, violent, because like, oh, wow, this is crazy, and I can see everything. And, they cannot imagine that. You really have to see it, and I think it's a big part of it.
And it brings on, then sort of aware of, let's say, method acting is really good, because, it's all the time, and everything is on camera. Even if the viewer is not looking at that or guided to a different position, everything's on camera all the time.
That's huge. Having actors that can perform in uninterrupted takes and maintain that performance over, I think like the longest scene, the breakup scene, is probably like 6 minutes. And that was just, that's a scene from a play, basically.
The actors with stage craft that have gone into film, let's say, or in television spend a lot of time, like, love it, because it's like back to that really present performance. Totally. They love it, which is great. We need them.
What was the process with Luke on the Shinola piece?
Excuse me?
What was the process with
Well,
Luke?
it was sort of because of the kind of man on the street style that we were doing. We really didn't rehearse. I mean, we blocking things. We spent time on that, but because we were talking, Luke was talking to people that worked in the factory. We wanted to keep that stuff spontaneous.
So a lot of improv.
Yeah, a lot of improv. I mean, how long is it till they put one of these cameras right in the middle of a stage, in New York on Broadway?
Yeah, they already are.
Yeah, are they?
Yeah.
So I mean, it's like,
Hamilton did something like that.
Did they? Oh.
Yeah, and they've done a couple of things like that.
that's got to be incredible.
They did a Lion King, which is pretty
Yeah.
wild to be up there with all these crazy puppets and stuff. Like, it's a
And of
different-
course
whole
the
different experience.
Cirque du Soleil, Felix and
That
Paul.
Cirque du Soleil is the thing that you showed me.
That's
that
the
was
first thing I showed you,
mind-boggling,
yeah.
But to speak to what you're talking about, I mean, there's different styles with all of it, but one of the things we really referenced was like early Robert Altman, where,
Totally.
because you've got to, it's not I speak, you speak, I speak, you speak. Everyone's stepping on each other, and that's the way the real world is. And so some of, that improvised thing is really important as well.
There's a piece at Sundance last year, Hard World for Small Things. If you ever get a chance to check it out, it's really one of like the best dramatic things that have been made. Directed by Yannick Sabravo. You're in a car going down through South LA, and they really just create the sense of a community going on around you. There are 7 different conversations happening, and depending on which way which direction you're looking, the entire time you get different stories. Just from one static location in the back of this car. It's pretty remarkable.
That piece really works because you're in a confined location. You've got, and you have all of that going on, so it's somewhere you would really be. That piece really works.
It's incredible. Just Altman-esque is just the
it's
the
that
guidestone.
12-track audio.
Yeah.
Well, wait. Is there any other question before we go back? Yes.
For those of us like me coming from traditional filmmaking and screenwriting, this is a very hard concept to wrap our heads around, I think, of how we either abandon the kind of narrative storytelling we've been doing in order to embrace a new kind of storytelling, which I think so far in what I've seen in VR, those have been the most interesting and effective kinds of things that are experiential and that are informational. Or, are we just not really seeing yet somebody find a way to tell stories that have been told in the past? I mean, just to use 3D for an example. You see a movie like Wizard of Oz, which was pre-3D, and you think, oh, that would be a great 3D movie. The only movie that I can think of that I would think of as a VR movie is that movie where it goes through the Tibetan Book of the Dead, where the guy dies and floats around. What's it called? Into the Void? Is that what it's called? Kind of obscure, but it would make a...
Enter the Void?
Enter the Void, yes. Enter the Void. It would make a really interesting VR movie. But after that, my mind kind of can't think of any others. I'm wondering, those of you who've worked in both, if you have any thoughts about films that are kind of, in your mind, good templates to have been a VR experience. So those of us who haven't had your experience yet might be thinking along those lines.
Well, one of the things that really worked in Invisible, from what I've seen, is split screen. So stuff from the 70s that uses a lot of split screen and stuff. Movies that have, like stories that are out there already. I mean, Shakespeare comes to mind right away because it's generally designed around theater in the round, right? But we don't want to just say, hey, this is just, we're filming a stage play here. Yeah. We want to evolve it. But stories are stories, there's what, 9 stories or 15 stories total? There's a number. I don't remember what it is offhand, but there's only so many stories, and we retell them in different ways consistently. So I think that's a hard question. I think it's more, how do we tell the story?
Yeah,
It's not so
thank
much
you.
what the story content is, it's how do we tell that story? You know, if it's a love story, are we telling it from multiple perspectives? Are we telling it from, so how we execute is I think almost a bigger question than what type of story.
I think
I
there's
would recommend to watch a lot of VR. You can just put on the goggles and watch it to really understand the medium. I'm not coming from a traditional filmmaker background, so I might be wrong about this, but I think that's how most of the people who coming from that background told me they learned about the medium. It's just watching other people's content.
Yeah, I think there is also the low-hanging fruits of horror, sci-fi, about like being there. Like The Matrix comes to mind immediately. I know you're into sci-fi. I've seen your movie, but at the same time, Rory over there has done a couple of love stories in VR, which is probably the least expected genre in virtual reality. You want to talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, where do you put the
Very,
spectator?
very, very close. Like it's maybe uncomfortably intimate at some points. Well, no, it's also invigorating. It's maybe, it's a whole different way. I think that pretty much I could see a way to tell The Godfather in VR, and it would be awesome because you'd be sitting there in the darkened room with Don Corleone, and you'd feel like you were in there with that. Like I'm pretty sure that I think that pretty much any 2D movie could be remade as a VR piece. There might be some, pacing shifts, but that story is still the same. Still the same story. I think that maybe people get caught up in we've had this idea of what VR is for 30 years now, and we kind of have it associated with sci-fi things or whatever. But it's really just another medium for telling all of the stories that we've been telling for thousands and thousands of years.
And another low-hanging fruit, which I'm assuming they're going to do a great job with, is something like Ready Player One. I mean, that's what the story's about, so it fits.
Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
I was wondering if any of you have had any experience using or working with omnidirectional treadmills to move around in VR.
Good question.
Is that like putting a rock in one hip, and as we walk forward, it rotates? Is that what you mean, or?
It's like a real treadmill, and you have the headset, and when you work in the virtual world, you can actually physically walk in all directions.
And then as the treadmill moves the story forward.
I have so far only very bad experiences with that. I've gotten very sick because there's always a very slight. It's never perfect. There's always a little bit sync issue between what you see and what you physically do, and that I'm one of those people who get sick very easily. But that being said, I believe in the future I'm room scale VR. I have an HTC Vive that let me do room scale, and it's, for me, the best experience I've ever had was in the HTC Vive. So I think the treadmills and all that stuff will be more location-based VR, so arcades where you go and have very high-end VR experiences are mostly games. Maybe one day we'll do stories you can walk in the story world forever. I don't know.
There was a really successful project that I saw. It was out of the program I went to, ITP at NYU, and it was just very, very simple. A guy, he put out a tricycle. You sit on the tricycle, and when you pedal, the video moves forward. And when you stop pedaling, the video stops. It was like a moving shot. So as you pedaled, it just triggered the video to roll. And he recreated the hallway scene from The Shining, right? And it wasn't a great, it was a prototype project, right? But it was really successful because you had to do something with your body while it moved, which gave you the sensation to connection and got rid of the vertigo. Essentially, what happens is you get sick because of vertigo, because of no connection to your body. And it was really, really successful. But again, that's something you're not going to serve at home. That is location-based, and that's one of the reasons. In China, there's a $1 billion industry this year, so far. It's pretty big compared to what we're doing here.
I just want to close the panel. We have 1 more minute because we are storytellers and we all think about the future. What is the boldest thing you've seen or you've done in virtual reality that you want to talk about and you think that's something that's is going to become a norm in the future?
Start down there.
Something very bold.
Start down there. Start down there.
That you've seen or done.
Well, I don't want to repeat what I said earlier. I think I talked about the 3 pieces that I'm most proud of. That
One
move the
thing.
camera, moving the camera.
Moving the camera.
Yeah, moving the camera.
What is the boldest move you've seen in VR?
The person walking with the camera all the time on the
On
head,
it.
above the head. It was a shoulder rig. He was wearing the weight on his shoulders, but the camera was above his head. And you know, he slide down an escalator. He walks around. He get punches, and you know, making that in VR, I think it's very challenging to not get the viewer sick.
We did, and I don't know how much of it actually makes the series, so I don't know if you'll see it, but we experimented with a lot of handheld work and how to operate handheld work. And I feel like you can hold, after what I saw, you can hold handheld for, well, in traditional, let's say 20 to 30 frames, so about a second. You know, you can punctuate with it, but how you physically shoot a handheld scene, I think was the most extreme thing we did.
Andrew?
Yeah, I don't have enough experience with it. I mean, I think the coolest thing I've seen is probably the Cirque du Soleil piece that you showed me.
So that was,
when
it's
we
called
first-
Box of Curios. It's Felix and Paul Studios who did Cirque du Soleil. So
But I mean, because of the envelope being pushed so fast, I think it's more kind of about the future almost. I mean, that's something that's been done. It's really cool. So I mean, I can't wait to see your show. The things that are being done I think is obviously where the most excitement is. The things that are coming in the future.
We did a lot of crazy stuff that didn't make it. You know, like I'd say 50% did not make it.
I want to see
Because
that.
it didn't necessarily, because it didn't work, and that's part of the experimenting
that's what
process.
it's about.
That's
Rory?
that's what's so fantastic about it. I think that like moving can be. I've seen some really exciting moving shots. I've seen some really like awesome edits that have worked. I think the Felix and Paul stuff. If you get a chance to watch anything that Felix and Paul have done, it's pretty much they're cut above everything else that's being made. They have a proprietary camera system, but I think the boldest thing might be just at this point having a static camera in one place and moving people around it and trying to do something interesting with that.
Good one. All right, thank you very much for your. Please stick around.